In Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, there's a pretty significant bug which I would describe as a hit connection registration bug, based on what it does. I'll get to this in a second, but just as a side note, I will refer to it as the damage bug from here on out, because in most circumstances it's just a damage loss due to failed hit registration, and it's easier to call it that. I just wanted to note that this isn't technically an accurate name, but rather a nickname that me and some other people use. To explain it simply, GU struggles to register multiple hits at the same time, which leads to multiple hits above a certain number connecting at the exact same time to be ignored or delayed by the game. This video will showcase and explain my observations of the bug to better understand how it works and what conclusions can be derived from them. To begin, here's a replicable way to confirm that the damage bug exists. Multiple large barrel bombs typically explode at the same time if stacked on a single spot, but with 3 or more players, there are 4 or more bombs going off at the same time, which leads to some of them not being registered. I'm using this low-rank double R0's quest to demonstrate it, because both of them have fixed and identical HP, meaning that if the same number of bombs kill one but not the other, not all of their damage has been subtracted by the other's health pool. They have just enough HP to be killed by exactly 10 bombs, or 7 plus 1 wake-up bomb. Bombs deal triple damage on wake-up hits, so the first one that goes off counts for 3. The regular bomb deals 142 in this quest, and the wake-up bomb deals 427 due to the quest defense mod. The Azuros has 1320 HP, so 1 wake-up bomb and 7 bombs are an exact kill. We start by hitting the first one with 3 bombs for 711 damage twice, also adding up to an exact kill. As you can see, the first Azuros died exactly as predicted. However, for the second one, we stacked all bombs on the same exact spot for the wake up, and despite the same amount of bomb damage going off on him, he did not die. This means not every bomb is counted when stacking them. It took me 3 additional bombs to kill him in this hunt, meaning only 5 of our bombs actually connected. I also tested this with HP display in Monster Hunter Generations. We stacked 6 bombs and tried to make them explode at the same time. What I found was that it dealt 5 separate damage ticks, 1 from the initial wake-up bomb and then the remaining ones 1 frame later each. Despite all 6 bombs going off, the last tick didn't subtract the final large barrel bomb's damage from the monster HP, meaning that the 6th bomb didn't get counted. Apologies for the shit video quality here, but this was the only way I could test this in multiplayer. In all my testing, it was nearly random how many bombs I went through, because they don't always get absorbed at the same rate, and unless you're analyzing HP screen data frame by frame like I did in these tests, you're not gonna get accurate measurements every time. But generally you can expect it to happen at 4 or more bombs. Second, rapid bow. This is actually how I know about this bug, because it's been known for a while that the game eats some damage on rapid bow power shots. The posts covering the bug describe it as a glitch that triggers when using power shots and loses roughly 20% of the power shot's damage when it occurs. Femeto and Laxaria's suspicion was that the last damage tick would be lost on power shots due to the hits connecting at the same time and the game being unable to register every tick. Based on the post on the Chinese forum discussing it, the numbers suggest that roughly 18% damage is lost, which is precisely how much damage would be lost to miss out on the second tick of Rapid 5. In my own tests, I could confirm that this is exactly what happens. By testing Rapid 3, a shot with 3 arrows with HP display, I also proved that the bug does occur on less than 4 ticks as well, just far less frequently, suggesting that this doesn't happen at a fixed or consistent rate, but that there is a correlation with higher tick rates. I linked the footage and the spreadsheet in the description if you want more detailed info about the trigger rate, but the gist is Rapid 3 tests suggest a roughly 10% rate of occurrence on power shots only, while Rapid 5 occurs roughly 2% of the time on release shots and over 80% on power shots. The distance from the monster seems to also play a role in this case, as Rapid 3 seem to rarely ignore damage ticks at crit distance, but get completely messed up hit connections at close range around 25% of the time. Sometimes power shot arrows would blatantly phase through hit zones that were clearly in their trajectory and either hit something behind it or nothing at all. Why this affects power shots so much more frequently is likely due to the different velocity of release in power shots. The missed arrows occurred on multiple occasions outside of specifically Rapid 3 at close range too, and more frequently depending on the distance and angle, suggesting that this is an all-pervasive issue that can happen depending on the type of shot, angle and distance from the monster, and how their hit zones are shaped. This issue seems to affect spread shots especially, causing every single power shot to miss ticks across every recorded power shot. It did not seem to outright absorb damage like Rapid 4 and 5, but up to 3 out of 5 of its arrows hit different hit zones. Additionally, I reviewed footage of these tests on emulator using the 60 FPS cheat and found out that there was not a single instance of damage loss or incorrect hit connections on any of the recorded shots, meaning that the frame rate is at least partially responsible for the bug. If you want to see the test results for yourself, I'll leave the explanations of the Chinese forum post and my own tests in the description. Next up, bowgun ammo. This is something I have rarely ever seen anyone bring up besides players from Hunter's Domain and Elixir who did a bunch of 4-player speedruns of GU, particularly with HBG. From their experience, PS3 is not worth using in a 4-player setting, even if the monster is a good target for it, because the game ignores a lot of ticks. Under Hunter's Domain's Bloodbath EX 4-player speedrun, there's a mention of it suggesting status shots are getting eaten because the game can't keep up with the high tick rate, which is roughly what's happening here. Which brings me to my own runs, because this also affected quite a few strats I tried. I did already mention this in the description of the Bloodbath EX and Quest of Friendship videos, but this bug actually made seemingly consistent strats incredibly inconsistent, because it sadly affects the Valor gauge fill rate and occasionally status shots. The easier one to show is the Quest of Friendship run, because I have video evidence of the game straight up not increasing my gauge upon hitting the monster, which you can see here. Usually, 7 to 8 slicing shots are enough to get into Valor from this distance, but since we 3 were shooting at the same time and slicing 2 hits 6 times, we got a bunch of overlapping ticks, eating each other up and causing over 90% of the runs to fail at Royal Lutroth, despite being 100% consistent solo. A similar thing also happened with Bloodbath, as the strat depended on me getting Valor before the para so I could siege it. Due to our DPS getting much better with practice, we had to adjust the strat to avoid flinches and make me shoot slicing 1 once instead of PS3 twice at the beginning. The issue was that this made getting Valor slightly more difficult because the threshold for getting it became harder to reach. I practiced this solo and got Valor 100% of the time when not making mistakes, whereas by repeating the exact same steps with the exact same aim during our attempts, the consistency dropped well below 10%. It was nearly impossible to get Valor past this point and get a good time, which is part of the reason our best run happened when we delayed a few shots. So while our strat is theoretically the fastest or close to the fastest possible strat, it gets bottlenecked by the damage bug so hard that an optimized God's Isle run could beat it despite the lower theoretical DPS. This also confirms that the hit zones and which parts the hits connect to don't play a role in this bug, as I was shooting from the front into the head and everyone else through the tail. A more recent instance of this also occurred during our Monster Hunter Channel 1 run, where it was unfortunately not possible to get Valor from outside of Rathalos raw range, which ruined a potential time save there, because Valor sheathing the raw became necessary to reach full Valor gauge. According to T's experience with other Elixir runs and some of my casual Hame runs, using ammo types with multiple hits such as pellet and slicing, the damage bug basically occurs on nearly all 4-player Bowgun strats to some degree, because it is impossible to guarantee no overlapping ticks unless you're shooting single tick ammo like normal too. And finally, in regards to Bowgun ammo observations, I did a quick test to quantify this damage loss a bit. I picked G3 Garuga Hunterthon and set up a status chain to contain him to create a comparable environment and had 1 to 4 slice light bowguns shoot him. The light bowgun players all used the same set with 100% crit and the same raw. I compared the time between the first shot fired and kill to see how fast Garuga would die, as well as theoretical damage and shot count to account for missed ticks, paramod and tri-blast damage. In my test, 2 slice light bowguns ended up losing about 5% DPS and 4 slice light bowguns lost somewhere around 10% DPS compared to 1 player. There's no way to determine an exact percentage because the factors for the damage bug occurring are near impossible to control, but it's the closest I got to getting a concrete number. The tests and evaluation are, of course, also in the description. There's another important thing to mention, which is the fact that this bug is not just a pure damage loss. This bug also affects status and various other mechanics such as Hunter Art and Valor gauge. You can see the difference between the Hunter Art gauges in the aforementioned slice test pretty clearly, for example. In the Bloodbath run, like mentioned before, we lost Valor gauge to this bug, and that is because if the bug occurs on your system and ignores a hit on your end, it does not get counted as a hit at all. Meaning any and all things related to the hit connection, such as status buildup, sharpness loss, Hunter Art gauge, or Valor gauge buildup will also not occur. Since the monster's actual hit connections and damage calculations of a multiplayer quest are handled on the quest host system, you can even get phantom hits from the bug. In case you don't know what phantom hits are, they sometimes occur online due to the online lag. Perhaps it's happened to you before that you clearly missed a hit but the monster got staggered anyway, or it got staggered well after your hit connected. This happens because your hit got delayed and only connected on the quest host system later due to the online lag, causing the monster to receive the hit you thought you missed anyway, or a hit you landed too late or even not at all. This phenomenon also interacts with the damage bug. Sometimes you could be hitting all shots of Para 2 for example, and the monster will still not be paralyzed despite being hit enough times on your screen. In such cases, the damage bug can be the reason for it. Your hit may have been counted for you, but it could have been ignored on the quest host system and not been counted for the monster anyway. Examples of this are once again our Bloodbath EX run, where Para was sometimes ignored. That being said, it generally doesn't really happen outside of Hame strats. It should also be noted that while the damage bug is a common source of missed hits, it's not the only one. Multiplayer lag is far more likely to just make your attacks miss rather than triggering the bug, and sometimes the game can just be stupid for completely unrelated reasons. Finally, after reviewing a ton of footage frame by frame with HP display cheat on, it appears as though the game subtracts damage only 1 frame at a time in all the footage I've seen. In the Monster Hunter Generations recording, for example, it subtracted each bomb separately for 5 frames, while the rapid bow tests generally displayed each hit separately with accurate damage values each frame after the impact. I also tested this using multi-hits on a ready-to-kill Great Macau, and the quest clear message indeed pops up only exactly 1 frame after the HP display reaches 0, not when the hit connects with the monster. With a 60 FPS cheat code, rapid arrows and bombs are subtracted twice as fast, also just 1 frame apart per damage tick, and the kill also happens exactly 1 frame after the HP reaches 0, confirming that the hit detection is directly tied to the frame rate of the game. That means that the game calculates each hit connection on separate frames, and if there are too many ticks on the same frame, the game simply doesn't check for the additional hits until the next frame. If the active damage hitbox of a bomb, for example, is gone by the time a frame is free to check it, there would be nothing left to damage check as far as the game is concerned, and the bomb vanishes without hitting anything. My rapid and spread bow tests confirm this as well, as the 60 FPS cheat test had no mistakes whatsoever on any of the shots. Especially spread, which had a perfect 100% miss rate at 30 FPS, but not a single miss at 60 FPS. You can even see how the ticks connect closer to the player in the footage. This is my attempt at visualizing how the miss ticks most likely happen based on the frame-by-frame analysis. The second arrow gets counted last and can hit the belly or nothing at all depending on the angle, or for yet unknown reasons disappear completely without hitting anything. The game running at 60 FPS, checking for hits at double the frequency, obviously has no trouble registering 4 hits if it doesn't have much trouble with 2 hits at 30 FPS, as shown here, so no damage ticks are missed in this example. Coming back to the question of why this affects power shots more, I think it now makes sense that it would be due to how the arrows are released. Power shots are actually quite a bit faster than release shots, causing them to connect on the same frame more often and pass through hit zones much quicker compared to release shots. In 4 frames after the arrow fires, for example, the release shot generally doesn't travel further than most hit zones are big, whereas power shots could easily travel through an entire hit zone in that time, which could explain why they are affected by the bug so much more. Why it only affects the second tick arrow and why it sometimes disappears completely without hitting anything at all is something I couldn't figure out yet, so we just have to accept that this happens. To summarize, here's what GU's damage bug does. It generally causes hits to miss or be completely ignored beyond a certain amount hitting at the same time, including damage status and hit feedback. This happens if too many hits connect on the same frame or in extremely short succession. The exact number of overlapping hits being registered properly doesn't seem to be fixed, but a damage loss consistently occurs past the third hit and sometimes even after just the second one. It happens regardless of hit zone hit or damage dealt. It only cares about the amount of ticks connecting at the same time because the game can only register 1 hit per frame. It affects each player individually, meaning damage and status loss due to hit overlaps will happen on the quest host system, but joining players may experience it in forms of loss of hunter art or valor gauge buildup. It most affects playstyles that rely on overlapping damage sources in high tick rates such as sleep bombing, multiple bowgun users using ammo types with multiple ticks, rapid bow, and potentially any other playstyles that run the risk of hitting too many ticks at once. What this means in practice: the damage bug will rarely, if ever, affect casual gameplay and is mostly insignificant as long as not everyone is using bowguns with high tick rates or stacking bombs. Low to moderate damage loss can be expected to happen on Hame strats involving multiple bowguns and sleep bombing. 4-player bowgun strats experience a noticeable damage loss and become much harder and less consistent the better the player comp and higher the tick rate is. Multiplayer Valor heavy bowgun runs can fail due to missed Valor gauge or status ticks. Rapid bow loses roughly 10 to 15% DPS from it, assuming rapid 5, and there's an unquantifiable damage loss from incorrect hit connections. While the rate at which it occurs isn't fixed, it happens often enough to assume that it triggers on over 80% of all power shots and not or very rarely on initial release shots. Check the spreadsheet for more details. Due to the fact that the second 4 motion value arrow disappears, Rapid 3 becomes slightly better than Rapid 4 on average for power shots. However, there's not a single bow in the entire game that benefits from this, so this is effectively irrelevant. Rapid 5 still ends up being the overall best rapid shot for both release and power shots. Spread bow hit connections just become very inconsistent with power shots. And finally, here's a few ways to mitigate it if your playstyle is impacted by it. While bombing a monster, build 2 separate stacks and detonate them individually or spread them out around the monster. This reduces the chances of bombs not hitting, although it does not guarantee that all of them will hit. Avoid using Pierce 3 for 4-player bowgun strats and stick to Pierce 1, even if the theoretical damage could be higher on some monsters. While filling the Valor gauge with slicing alongside other players, try to delay your shots a bit to lower the chance of overlapping ticks occurring. Adjust your strat if you don't get into Valor consistently. Sadly, nothing can be done about rapid bows in the vanilla game. You will lose damage no matter what. If you want to play optimally, you're simply gonna have to accept the damage loss because this changes nothing about the meta. You should also learn how to use the Harbinger's Battle Bow for heavy 5 for most optimal strats anyway, as it's just better in most matchups due to this bow's better shot type and stats. For spread bows, try to position yourself in a way that assumes arrows will miss and hit something behind what you're aiming at to minimize damage loss. For example, hit Gore's head from an angle where the legs would absorb the arrows that don't connect with the head. And that's about it. I've been wanting to research this bug for a while now because I've seen a lot of unconfirmed assumptions and misinformation about it online, and nobody has really pointed out all the playstyles that are affected by it. Testing it turned out to be incredibly difficult due to the inconsistency of it, but thanks to the people helping me, I was able to get sufficient data on it to formulate how it generally works. So thanks to all the players who helped me test the bug and do 4 player rounds. I hope this clarified what the bug does and helps you understand why you mysteriously lose damage sometimes and how to mitigate the issue.